Amy and Vic are plagued by horrific nightmares of the firemen destroying everything in sight, including their friends and family. But their nightmares turn into reality when Amy learns that the fireman isn't spreading his flames alone. We're going to talk about it in our review of Charred Remains number 3 from Mad Cave Studios. See you in 3. And welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Charred Remains number 3 from Mad Cave Studios. In this issue, Amy discovers that the fireman isn't acting alone, which puts her and Vic at the center of a growing threat to the city. Before we get started, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell for notification. Your attention is greatly appreciated, and make sure to stay through to the end for our final rating and score. So let's talk about the credits. In this issue, Charred Remains number 3 is written by Anthony Cleveland, art and colors by Andrea Muti, letters by Taylor Esposito, and the main cover is drawn by Man House. So let's talk about what happened in the previous issue. In the previous issue, Vic was plagued by horrific nightmares of people burning and hearing voices in the fire, and him not being able to save anyone that's calling out and screaming for help. The nightmares are throwing him off. He's getting agitated, he's not getting any rest, and it's really turning him inside out and forcing him to not focus on his day-to-day abilities as a fireman. He confides in his captain, and the captain says, I used to have those same kind of nightmares and problems in my earlier years, and I have a solution that's going to help you. But before they can talk about what that solution is and whether or not Vic is ready to hear it, they called away in a fire to continue that conversation at a later point. In between fires and doing his job, Vic keeps getting an envelope shoved under his home door with pictures that seem to suggest that there's some kind of face or figure in the flames. So somebody's trying to convince him that the fireman is real. On the other side of the story, Amy goes to visit her friend Jade, who she saved in the previous issue from the burning homeless encampment. She finds out that Jade has been checked out of the hospital by an organization that's considered a charity organization called Hope's House. When she goes to Hope's house to find her friend Jade, she finds out that Jade has been given medical treatment, food, clothing, a place to live, work, and has been sent out on assignment, all in a very miraculously short period of time, which seems very fishy and very suspicious. Amy asks for information about where she can find Jade, but she can't get anywhere, and basically now she can't find Jade anywhere. Later we find out that Amy was the one who was feeding the pictures into Vic without his knowledge, and when she gives him the next set of pictures, Vic surprises her, and they get into an argument about whether or not the fireman is real, and whether or not Vic is resisting believing in the fireman simply because he truly doesn't believe it, or because he doesn't want to believe it. And the two part ways on a sour note, but it looks like they're kind of starting to feel each other out as far as coming to that joint belief that the fireman is real, and then you join forces eventually to do something about it. It's suggested, but it doesn't quite go that far. So that takes us to this issue. And now Amy's nightmares concerning the firemen and people burning, especially her parents, are becoming more vivid and more detailed. And she hears her parents talking about the fireman, saying, don't let his flame touch your skin or you'll burn with him and you'll become part of him, which sort of sounds kind of creepy in a cultish kind of way. Likewise, Vic is having similar nightmares about the fireman and him just burning everything in sight. He once again reaches out to his captain and says, I can't take it. These nightmares are throwing me off. I'm super tired. I can't focus. And the captain says, okay, I think you're ready for the solution I have for you. Before he can tell him all about it, alarm bells start going off, and they find out that the pumping stations around New Orleans are starting to be set ablaze. Now, if you're not familiar with New Orleans, it is at the water level or below in some spots. So the pumping stations are critical to keep water from overrunning the city, especially when you have hurricanes or major storms. So the pumping stations are incredibly critical to New Orleans infrastructure, and so all hands on deck and all the fire forces are sent out to try and put the flames out. Amy hears the radio announcements coming in about these pumping stations setting on fire, and she soon hears that the pumping stations are being set afire in order. Pumping station 12, 13, 14, etc. She races over to 15, thinking that she can get ahead of the fireman and try and capture him, or at least capture evidence that he's setting the fires and maybe get somebody to believe her if she can get some kind of proof. So Vic is at one pumping station, Amy's at the other. Vic goes into his pumping station. It looks like a total loss, but then he starts hearing screaming in the back in a small locked room. He breaks into the room and he sees what he believes is the fireman, this sort of like fiery demon, and burning people are kneeling down and prostrating themselves to him in worship. And they're saying, "What now? We're burning with him, and we are part of his chosen, and it's so warm and inviting, and it's like a crazy scene." As he rushes out, he sees what looks like a lantern with a candle in it, and he grabs the lantern and rushes out. On the other side of town, next to the pumping station that where Amy's visiting it, she goes in. It's not on fire yet, but she sees her friend Jade, and Jade is making some of those same chants and making those same statements about being warm and being near the fireman and being safe in his flames. And she's carrying a similar type of lantern with a candle in it. And they fight over the lantern because Amy tries to get Jade to stop from attempting to set the pumping station on fire. But in the tussle, Jade gets the fire on her skin and she starts going up in flames, and then the whole pumping station goes up in smoke. Amy escapes the pumping station. Now she has a similar lantern with the candle burning it that Vic now has. So then the issue ends with the two heroes, if you will, or protagonists anyway, both having experiences involving the firemen at separate locations, both coming away with this sort of lantern with a candle in it, and now they have to figure out how far are they willing to believe that this thing is real. Are they willing to work together, and where does Hope's house figure into all this, if at all? So that's where we end up. So let's talk about likes and dislikes. What do we like about Charred Remains number 3? Good pacing. There's an oppressive atmosphere of anxiety and sort of unsettledness, because both of the protagonists are experiencing these nightmares and they can't focus, and it's like it's heightening their stress, and they just can't function, and now they have to deal with this demon that's trying to immolate everyone and everything in sight, and it really builds up your anxiety levels, and that's what you want out of a horror comic. That's great stuff. Plus the kind of the mystery of what's going on with the fireman. What does he want? What are the lanterns? Where does it all fit together? There's intriguing. There's little bits here and there that are kind of giving you something to think about and something to chew on in terms of a mystery. But on the flip side of that is what we didn't like about Charred Remains number 3. We're 3 issues in and we still kind of don't know where the plot is headed, as far as what is the journey they're on, what is the goal, where does Hope's house fit into all of this, because it's sort of brought up and then dropped. It might come back later, but we're not sure. So there are a lot of big pieces that don't quite fit together, so the plot hasn't quite gelled just yet. Not quite sure if this is a 5-issue or 6-issue series or longer. It's getting there, but it's taking its time getting there. And so there's a very fine line between mysterious intrigue, just being curious about what's happening, and frustration if you don't get enough of the puzzle pieces filled in to make sense of what's going on, or at least start to think you know what's going on, even if there are misdirects and red herrings. So it's not quite at the frustration part yet, but it has the risk of being there if we don't get a little bit more clarity about where we're headed, what we're trying to accomplish, and how we're getting there. We need a little bit more direction, a little bit more purpose and momentum, and that's kind of lacking in this issue. So what do we think about the art? Andrea Muti is a little bit of an acquired taste, but not really. His art style really fits this genre, meaning horror, because there's so much expression in the character's eyes, especially when they're expressing shock and fear and grief or anger, or all the emotions that you need characters to express, particularly within a horror story. It's all right there, and Muti nails it. You can forgive, looseness in the lines when it comes to figure work and anatomy and backgrounds and all that other stuff, if the characters are expressing exactly the emotion that you want them to feel, and Muti nails it. So it looks great. Now, not everybody's going to be a fan of the sort of the watercoloring style of art and the looseness of the lines and just how things look a little bit wiggly and jiggly, but if you get the eyes right, I'm a firm believer that you can forgive everything else, even if it's not technically crisp and sharp. So final thoughts. What do we think about Charred Remains number 3 from Mad Cave Studios? Interesting action, great horrific atmosphere. The design of the monster in particular is unsettling and could be shocking if you saw it in real life, so you can imagine that. And the overall tone and the atmosphere makes you feel unsettled and anxious and anxiety ridden, which is exactly what you want out of a horror story. On the flip side of that, the story still hasn't quite gelled in terms of direction, purpose, and momentum. So we're sort of enjoying the atmosphere, but not quite sure if we're heading anywhere yet. So it's keeping you in the moment, but it's not really pulling you along to where the story wants to go yet. There's more issues. We'll see how it turns out. Therefore, we're going to give Charred Remains number 3 from Mad Cave Studios a solid 8 out of 10. If you like this review and you want to hear more, stay tuned through the outro for another review just like this one.